Okay, I think we're recording. Hi, everyone. Carol Scott with the National Ombudsman Resource Center. Today is Wednesday, August the 28th, and we're going to talk about building relationships with program representatives. Thanks for joining us today. I'm hoping that this will be just real informal with as much conversation as we can. I encourage you to look at your toolbox and find the chat feature and feel free to type stuff in, send it to everybody. You got the options of to send it to everyone. And so as we move along, if there's something that's said that intrigues you, make a comment about it. You know, that's the one nice feature about Zoom, is that you can have this chat group kind of having a conversation, although I don't want it to take away from the speakers and everything. So we're going to talk about building relationships. Our goals for today's agenda: to learn some strategies for building relationships, to understand why it's important to have a good working relationship with your program reps, and then to identify ways of overcoming challenges, challenging situations. And so I'm hoping that maybe some of you new folks, you might have a situation that you'd want to talk about, and then Victor and Bev and any of the other mentors are welcome to chime in and give you some tips or something. So we're gonna again talk about working relationships, tips for developing relationships, and tips for overcoming challenging situations, questions and answers. So I want to start with a poll. And I want you to fill in yes or no. And I'm really interested in the new folks answering this, but if those of you that are mentors want to also chime in, feel free to do that. So do you meet with your local programs at least quarterly? Have you visited all your local programs in their offices? And do you call or have contact at least monthly with all of your programs, whether that's one call with everyone or just an individual call? Okay, I'm going to say we're closing it. Can you all see the responses? Bev, can you see what the responses are?
No, I cannot.
Okay, well then let me end the polling and share the results.
No, I can.
Okay, so 10 of you said that you meet at least quarterly, 4 said that you don't. About half of you have visited all your local programs in their offices and half have not. And most of you have at least monthly contact with all of your programs. So that's good. And I think Bev and Victor, those might be things that you'll talk about as you're talking about the relationships. So thank you on that. Get rid of that. So our speakers today are Victor from North Carolina, and Victor is one of the few state ombudsmen who have actually worked in different states under different kinds of organization. So Victor, we're so glad to have you. And Bev works in a very large program with lots of, well, not as many local programs as some states have, but quite a few local programs. So appreciate both of you being available today. So we're going to turn it over to Victor, and Victor, you just talk and let me know when you want me to advance the slide.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is Victor Rija from North Carolina. Yeah, go ahead, please. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
The structure we have here is a pyramid, and I thought I'll show you that pyramid so that when I start talking about the challenges you can understand why. We do have at the state office here, we have about 3 of us, myself and the 2 specialists, elder rights and ombudsman specialists. And we do have 100 counties grouped into 16 AAAs. We call them 16 regions. And by statute, all our 36 regional ombudsmen have their offices at the AAA. So we have 36. So 3 of us at the state office, 36 at the AAAs. And we also have our volunteers, community advisory committees. It used to be about 1,100 plus, the most in the country. But since final rule, ACL said they had to be certified and designated. So we've gone through designation, certification, and designation for each and every one of them. So we have about 900 right now. Next slide, please. When we talk about, or my question would be, who are the program representatives? You know, we group them into 2. We're looking at we're looking at the internal, which will be the ombudsman who are in the office with me here, and then we're looking at our 36 regional ombudsmen who are the AAAs. Even though they are the AAAs, we still consider them, you know, the program representatives. And I'm also looking at the division of aging, you know, where we are housed also here. And I'm also looking at 900 plus volunteers. So I consider them internal program representatives. And then when I look at the external, I'm looking at, you know, all the folks we interact with. It might be the AAA there, it might be the providers, it might be National, it might be ACL, and you know, so those are the ones I consider as you know, external. Next slide, please. And how do we build relationship? I think the first thing is, you know, when I say internal, I think it's communication. We're looking at the emails, you know, constant daily emails, you know, we're looking at the telephone calls, you know, to different groups, you know, to different representatives for different reasons every day. We're looking at, you know, when I look at my office here, we have what is called the weekly planning meetings, you know. The 3 of us here, we hold it together in one of the offices, you know. We simply talk about what impacts the program. So we do this on a weekly basis. We call it the weekly planning meetings. And from there, we might even develop action plans. We might talk about some of the challenges across the state, you know, so that we can get back to the regional ombudsman. We also have what is called the mandatory quarterly training. Each local or regional ombudsman is mandated to attend. You can be absent, you know, from one, and if you have to be absent, you've got to let me know that, okay, this is the reason I'm going to be absent, you know. But it is mandatory. It is quarterly, and we go through different things, you know. I also schedule what is called visits to regions. You know, we've got the 16 regions, you know, throughout the 100 counties. One of the things I think I like to do very well is, you know, just schedule visits, you know, to those regions, you know, mainly, you know, to make the local and regional ombudsman, you know, in their own offices, in their own talks, you know. And what do we do when we get there? Number one, we might decide to visit facilities. You know, it could be problem facilities. It might be areas where they're having challenges, or it could be facilities maybe that just want a grant and just from a culture change implemented some things and things of that nature, or it could even be facilities with best practices. You know, so that's one of the things, you know, I do very well. And we're looking at the hurricane season right now. In the past 3 weeks, I've been visiting the coastal areas, you know, basically going back to visit facilities that experienced hurricane last year, just to see what is it that you're going to do differently this time around, you know. You know, so travel through this throughout the state that way. Technical assistance, and then we participate in what is called the regional events and meetings, just to make sure people know that, okay, we are thinking about them. They're not there by themselves, you know. You know. And then when I talk about the external, one of the things we do is our AAA directors, you know, we have a standing agenda item whereby, we can talk about anything that impacts the regional ombudsman, and the AAAs, at the meetings there. We include the directors in ad hoc committees. One thing was interesting during final rule, we had about two directors, a state unit on aging director and another DSS, Department of Social Services. We have one of the directors, included on the work group for the final rule. It was interesting to hear their outlook about, how APS, adult protective services, etc., what they do and what we do as ombudsmen. The resident is declined. We must obtain residents' consent and things of that nature. And it's interesting how other people think and what they do. We attend community events and we serve on panels and we participate in teleconferences. Next slide, please. When we talk about challenges, I showed you the pyramid, 100 counties, 16 regions. Okay, so again, so when I talk about challenges, I'm looking at, okay, how do we ensure that, okay, all of us are consistent about things we do. So that brings to mind that quarterly training, that brings to mind some of the webinars we do, that brings to mind some of the emails, we send out about, if we monitor data, if we uncover anything, we generate, information from that and pass it on to everybody. We look at the State Unit on Aging leadership. Several of them have different backgrounds, some come from APS, some have a AAA background. And again, so what I have to do as a state ombudsman who's worked in Delaware, where they have the centralized, system where everybody, works for the state, versus where I am right now, I've got to be careful about, what side is the AAA director on, because yes, they are here now, perhaps they worked in APS in the past, perhaps they worked at the AAA in the past, yet they still have some of those, bearings and things of that nature. Programmatic versus personnel oversight. That is pretty interesting. Over here, I have the programmatic oversight. Okay, but because the regional ombudsmen are in AAAs, they adhere to the personnel policies of the AAA. So you can see where those things can clash, so programmatic versus personnel. So in other words, they almost have to, two supervisors, to contend with. Again, what we do is, communication with the AAA directors, communications with the regional ombudsman are some of the ways where we make sure, we don't create any barriers for each other. We do have the budget challenges. When I look at our program, it is a pass-through. We get the money from ACL, we pass it through. And, sometimes I'm almost tempted, and I told my boss about this, what if we were to bring the program in-house? Okay, you can see what we can do with all the money. Some of the money that goes to the indirect, at the AAA, etc., we can see what we can do with that money here, provide more regional ombudsmen, to do more advocacy work, Conflict of interest is one of those things you've got to look out for, the annual evaluations, and then lastly, when I look at the local allegiance, you can never underestimate that, because if you go to some of the regions, some of the regional ombudsmen, they've worked for years with the AAA director. So don't never underestimate that, relationship. Some of them go to the same churches, some of them do everything together, and yet they work for you, they report to you, they report to the AAA director. So you got to be on the lookout. Next slide, please. What do I see as opportunities? I think I like to look at myself as the experience in Delaware in 9 years here, and then I've been here a little over 4 years. That's okay. Yes, maybe to a degree, I might be an experienced leader. All state employees in Delaware, so that was centralized. And over here, I'm looking at the centralized and the decentralized nature here. What we also have here is our regional ombudsman. They are very skilled. They are very experienced. All the 36. If I look at the grouping, I think the average average is probably average time of service probably looking at about I think about 40% of them at about 5 to 10 years, and about 20% at about 11 to 20 or so, or 20 plus, and the remaining, I say about 1 to 5. When I look at the experience too, in terms of having worked as a regional director 4 or 5 years for the Region 3 Ombudsman in Delaware. I think I was 1 year as a NISOP treasurer before I resigned and came down to North Carolina, and also serving as 1 year as a first vice president of NISOP. Yeah, I think it's pretty equipped me with that experience. And then lastly, I think I have the flexibility and I have the ability to pick up the phone and email and contact any of you guys, at any time. I think that is a pretty big asset. Yeah, being able to reach into that network for advice. Yeah. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was talking and I was muted. Victor, do you do annual evaluations of your regional programs?
Not all regional or AAAs, contact us for it, and that is something we've offered. That okay, yes, and I think it lands, it's more value in it, if they come to us and ask us, what we think, and some of them will even ask us in terms of, their performance, data performance, what do I think about the regional ombudsman, and I gladly give it to them. But not all of them come to us for that information. But that is something we told them at the bi-monthly meeting, that okay, when you want to do your evaluations, we are here. We'll be glad to give you information. Where do I get all my support from? Okay, I look at my boss, the elder rights chief. I look at the two ombudsmen, the two specialists in our office here. I look at all the regional ombudsmen too. They are all wonderful people. I can always call them, I can always go to their staff meetings, some of them meet on Mondays, some of them meet, in their group, in their offices, I let them know I'm coming, and I do that around, so this way, meet with them, talk to them, they can tell me things, they can ask me questions and things of that nature. The regional ombudsman, the volunteers also, because some of the volunteers too, they've been around for years, if you want to know something about the place, they can tell you everything you need to know. Our director, the legal services developer, AAA. So I guess all the shareholders, all the stakeholders, are people that, really give the support. Next slide, please. And probably the next slide. Okay, the next slide, I think that's probably the last one there. I think you get to know, it's important to get to know all the representatives, all the stakeholders. You got to get connected. You got to get involved. Don't wait to be invited to meetings, invite yourself. Emphasize the role of the ombudsman. You'll be amazed that, many people don't know what we do. Okay, so not until you get to the table, you start letting them know what we do. Always remind them also that the reason we are in business is because of the resident. It's more important also to listen to people, listen to them and try to understand their position. I never say you're wrong. I listen to you. I want to understand your position, and maybe there might be something I can learn from it. Uphold the code of ethics for ombudsman. I think that is very, very valuable. I think Bev and I recall years ago, I think we worked together on a document, ethics for ombudsman, So again, so when I talk about, that experience, working with people like Bev, Becky, Joe, and, even Carol too, So yeah, the code of ethics for ombudsman, I think, is something we must always uphold. The network is very, very important. Other programs might perceive you as a non-team player because we are different. Again, it's not that we are a non-team player. I think the role is letting them know that, okay, this is our position, we've got to do it because that is the way the resident wants us to do it. Last slide, please. Okay. And then that would be the last slide there. And, so what are the benefits that I see of building relationship? I think, number one, good working relationship, people you can turn to for advice, for input and things of that nature. And what does that do? That leads you to effective collaboration. You get to work with all the stakeholders. One of the things I tell the association, wherever I've been, Delaware, and here is this. We work for the residents, we mean work for the residents, but we're all playing together in the sandbox. Okay, so it behoves us to just clean the line, look at the resident, and then we can effectively advocate for residents. Okay, so that's all I have. Thank you.
Victor, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to now turn to Bev, and so Bev, give us some wisdom, give us some tips, ask some questions, and just a reminder, if you're wanting to ask a question or make a comment, use the chat and be sure to have it be responding to everyone, unless you particularly want to just send it to one person.
Hi, everybody. Great to be on the call today. Thanks for including me, Carol. A lot of what I would say is not terribly different from what Victor said. We do meet with so we have, we're very fortunate in Ohio to have a great state funding for our program. And so we have, soon we'll have a state staff of 9, including me. We have had 8 for a while, but we're adding a position. We have 12 regional ombudsman programs, about 70 paid staff in those programs, currently around 180 volunteers, but that will be changing because we have some new state funding that will require, and we're requiring a full-time volunteer coordinator in each program and a robust volunteer recruitment and retention effort. So those numbers will be increasing. We're looking forward to that. We also last year started, or I guess in 2019, started an AmeriCorps project. So we have several AmeriCorps volunteers in our regional programs, and we're about to start year 2. So that's a unique part of how we try to help our regional programs with resource development. So we manage that in the state office and get those AmeriCorps volunteers out to the regional programs, and they have to dedicate, I think it's like 1,700 hours to service over the year. So it's like having almost a full-time ombudsman, and we certify them at the paid staff level, and so they're very productive and essentially free to our regional programs, and really pretty inexpensive to us as well. So we have lots of points of contact with our regional ombudsman. Each program has a program director, and we have regular interaction with the directors and staff. So we meet with, we do Ombudsman continuing education sessions every other month with everybody. We expect at least one person per program. We tend to get 40 to 60 people at those. And then in alternating months, we meet just with the program directors to talk about program management responsibilities, and those are day-long meetings. Then we do our designation and service reviews for our regional programs on an annual basis. I go on some of those. I did one alone last week because we have a couple vacancies in our office. And we also work with the Department of Aging our fiscal office does fiscal monitoring of our regional programs. So we get there once a year for program review, and then we coordinate with our fiscal monitoring staff to talk about any issues that have arisen financially. When we do those DSRs or at other times, we will sometimes go to facilities with the regional program. We have some programs that have some well, every program has some especially problematic providers, and so we, in an effort to support them, will make a visit to those facilities so they know that we have seen them and they can show us what they talk to us on the phone about all the time. And so it's another area where we can support them. Our health department holds a meeting with nursing homes that are newly added to the special focus facility list, and they involve us in those meetings, and we invite a representative from the regional program to come to those meetings as well. So they're part of that more systems kind of improvement effort. We also started, Erin Pettigrew in our office a few years ago started a process that we call troubled home exercises, and she developed a way for us to do a deep dive on particular facilities where, our regional program identifies a facility that they're having a lot of challenges with. And so Erin put together this process and kind of a grid of information, and she assigns staff in the regional program. Everybody in the regional program gets involved. We have one day where we go to the program, or they come to our office, and they have prepared ahead of time. They do research. One person looks at satisfaction surveys. Another person looks at health department surveys, and each person has an assignment. And then we just sit in a room and talk about what the problems are and brainstorm some quality improvement ideas for that home. And then we keep in touch with that regional program and try to support them as they work with the home to improve quality. We also have some quality improvement projects that we lead, mostly that are CMP funded, and we always build in money for the regional ombudsman programs to support those projects. And it's increasingly difficult to do that given the CMS scrutiny and how we pay staff out of those funds and so on. So it's challenging, but it can be done, and it's another way that we can be supportive of our regional ombudsman programs. One thing I wanted to mention is when we get complaints about regional staff, and we do get them, I'm sure that you all do as well, we make our first phone call to the regional ombudsman and ask them what happened from their perspective. So when we talk to the provider, then we kind of know the ombudsman's perspective on the situation and can be supportive whenever possible. And then if we discover that the ombudsman has done something they shouldn't have done or hasn't done something they should have done, then we deal with it, we approach it, we're honest with the provider about the need for improvement, and we work with the regional ombudsman program director on those things, and then move on, and usually we have good outcomes. Let's see. Sometimes we'll work with our regional programs to support them in their communication with their sponsoring agencies. Some of our programs are in area agencies on aging, but some are not. And they may have challenges with funding allocation, or how much they're taking for indirect expenses, or slow hiring processes, things like that. And so we will talk with our regional ombudsman, identify where they think the problems are, and then we can help them approach their sponsoring agency, or we can sort of come up with it on our own to protect our ombudsman. We'll do a review of the program, and we'll just include that, and we'll talk to the sponsoring agency about issues that we have that are impeding the success of the program that might be coming from the sponsoring agency. So one thing I wanted to tell you about that we have in place in Ohio is in our what we call our Ombudsman Practice and Documentation Manual, which started out as just our reporting instructions, but we've added to it over the years. We have an appendix of tip sheets or guidance sheets, and one of them is communication tips for a unified office of the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. And so we ask all of our regional ombudsmen to use these guidance sheets, and they're not necessarily requirements, but things that we do expect. Things like in this particular one, communication is essential to a unified office because it helps ensure a consistent response, identifies hotspots that might require policymaker attention, identify resource gaps, allow us to capitalize on opportunities to educate influential people. So there are a lot of reasons that it's important to have a unified office, even though they're not our employees. We ask them to notify us if they become aware of a variety of things like situations, good or bad, that receive media attention, an unusual termination, like maybe an administrator was walked out of the building. We want to know about that. Potentially controversial situations, missing residents, unusual injuries. We had this come up just yesterday where we learned from another source that a resident in an assisted living facility had killed himself because when he got access to chemicals, and he was suicidal, and the ombudsman had heard about this resident, and he drank drain cleaner. And so the ombudsman had not told us about it, and they knew about it. So we gave them this reminder. Inappropriate or unusual contact between staff, ombudsman, and consumers, disasters, and so on. So we ask them to let us know about those things, and likewise, we let them know when we find out about something. So as soon as we heard about the drain cleaner, we picked up the phone and called the ombudsman and found that she already knew about it. But in most cases, if we get information, we're going to call them immediately. We might ask them to go out. We might ask them for some background on the particular provider or a situation if they know about it. We support them in media contact. We want to know what messages that they are giving to the media, so we do ask them to talk to us before they do interviews. We know which programs are comfortable doing that and which aren't, and which ones I'm going to say, I'll talk to them. I'll talk to that reporter, because we don't want, if we know reporters are going to be hard-hitting, we don't want our regional programs to be put on the spot. So sometimes we'll just volunteer to take on those interviews ourselves. Let's see here.
Bev,
Yeah.
how do you determine, you just mentioned that that you'll maybe do the interview. Would there be times when you would go out to the facility or one of your staff in addition to or instead of a local program? Or do you always ask them to?
Sometimes we'll go ourselves, or usually with the regional program. We recently had a fire in a facility, and the state fire marshal contacted me about it. So I called the ombudsman, and she and I just went and spent the day at a church with the residents while they were working on finding other places for them. So we will go out with them. There have been times where a regional program has been short-staffed or in transition, and we have actually handled a region. We had one region that we were the program for about a year when we were looking for a new sponsoring agency after one withdrew. And so we did all of the ombudsman work in those facilities, which was really challenging. We did it from Columbus, and we obviously did not get having our regular presence at those homes, but we were able to respond to complaints at least. And so then when we did get a new sponsoring agency, we spent a lot of time with them, getting them acquainted and so on. So yeah, sometimes we just need to use our state resources to support them.
And you're able to do that because you have other staff?
Right, because we have state staff to do that. We also, several years ago, changed our rule. So we have a rule that says what our designated regions are, and we added language to that particular rule to say that that if resources are available, we may ask another regional program to cover, to help another region. So we have had to do that on occasion. We had one nursing home that was suing an ombudsman, and so we asked an ombudsman from another region to provide services to that facility, and then we gave them extra money in their grant to cover additional mileage and that sort of thing. So sometimes we'll call on our other regional ombudsmen to help fill gaps as well if we're not able to do it. And I know, not every state is as lucky as we are to have a robust state staff to be able to do that. So that just gave us some additional flexibility to use our regional programs. And we have one regional program who recently volunteered to assist us at the state office with mentoring other local staff, and we are taking them up on that. We have an ombudsman who has had a challenge with her certification exam, and the program director has been working with this ombudsman on improvement of performance and so on. And so I called this other program director and said, hey, I think some outside mentoring would be helpful to reinforce what this person's being told by her program director in our office, and it'd be good for her to see how things operate in another part of the state. So she's going to go spend some time in another region.
Thank you.
And it's nice to have the relationship with the regional programs that we can pick up the phone and know that they'll do that for us. Any other questions?
Hey, Carol? Carol?
Yes.
Yeah, if I could add this, please. A couple things I will advise, I will suggest to our folks is if you look at the NASOP monthly meetings and the open membership meetings, I think they are wonderful forums that I think I suggest that any one of us should always attend. The monthly NASOP meetings, first Thursday of the month, and then the open membership, I think that's the third Thursday of the month. Even though if you don't say anything, if all you do is just, dial in and listen to what people are talking about, I think they are, you can pick up wonderful, wonderful information, and I think they will even help, for development, and then the opportunity to serve on committees. We've got about 4, 5, 6 different committees. Yeah, those are wonderful opportunities, to say, yes, you invest some time, but what you're doing in return is, you are really building yourself up also. You're picking up information, when you offer comments about the legislation at the national level and things of that nature, yes, you are picking up information. So that would be an advice to, ombudsman, participate in those meetings, join the committees. I think those things are pretty good. Yeah.
Thank you, Victor. I think that's good advice, because everyone that's been around for any time knows the value of talking to other state ombudsmen about how they do things, and certainly sitting in on NASOP meetings can be very valuable. Anyone have any questions for Bev or Victor? We're not done yet, but take this opportunity. Feel free to unmute yourself or to type something into the chat box. Feel like I'm going to start calling on people, but okay, well, we'll just move on. Thank you, guys. So 2 of the handouts that I sent out several times over the last couple of weeks. One is the Spirit Decor, Cultivating Unity, and then the Strengthening the Connection. Both of these documents, even though they're a few years old, hold a lot of good ideas. And my hope is that you took the time to at least skim through them. And I'm wondering if any of you saw something in there that either affirmed something you're already doing or led to or is leading you toward adopting a new practice. So would anyone like to speak to either of these documents?
Well, this is Jenny from Missouri.
Hi.
Hi. I did skim through the documents. I noticed it talked about some long-term care ombudsman programs have like a newsletter. We don't have a newsletter in Missouri, but I did implement about a year and a half ago what we call Friday Scoop. And it's just an email that goes out from the state office to all of our regional programs with updates about things that are going on, maybe upcoming webinars that they can attend, or any during legislation time. We have a update every week with what's going on with legislation, so we track that for them, and it's right there in the scoop. And that has been very successful here. The regional programs like that because it reduces the amount of emails that they get throughout the week, because we try to kind of consolidate stuff that we might send out, separately when possible. Sometimes they still get additional emails sent to them in addition to their Friday Scoop, but it does cut down on the amount of email. And it's just kind of easy for them to go back and refer to things that way then too. If they need to say, now what did they say to do about this situation, they know that they can go back to the scoop and look at it. So I think that that's something that we've implemented that's worked out pretty well.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else do something like that, or send something out to your volunteers from the state level?
Carol?
This is Bev. We did a weekend update for years, and it just got to be a lot. And then I was away from the program for a year and haven't reinstituted that. But I think that's a great idea. It's actually a good reminder. We do a quarterly webinar for our volunteers. Also, I forgot to mention that, so they have a connection to the state office.
Okay, thank you. Mark, was that you?
Yeah, I don't know if Claudette or anybody from New York is on the phone, but one of the things that we did was send out program data on a quarterly basis so they could see kind of how they fit in the total picture. And I think it's speaking to one of the points that Bev was making before. I mean, you're trying to unify folks and make them feel like they're operating in one program as opposed to a little franchise all on their own. And so we found that to be very, very helpful. And I think there was some friendly competition among some of the local programs at that point where they could see their data compared to other programs, regional programs data. And it just kind of, I think it was helpful for the volunteers in the sense of, and we always struggled to get them to turn in reports, and this way they actually saw what their numbers looked like and how they were contributing to the data of the program, and I think that made a difference. I'm assuming they're still doing that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else pick up anything out of the handouts that you said, ooh, I'm already doing that, or gosh, I want to do that?
Hi, this is Kelly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
What stood out for me was the building relationships with local ombudsman is something that I had thought about doing. So this was very helpful in kind of reinforcing that idea for me in terms of just trying to build stronger relationships with the regional programs. And then something that really stood out for me was cultivating the relationship with the directors of the agencies. That's something that I definitely need to do being new, so they get to know me. So that's very helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I was interested, Victor, that you mentioned that you meet regularly with the AAA directors and are always on their agenda. I think that's something I wish I had done on a more regular basis than just waiting for a crisis to come, and then I was running to their to their meeting. That I, even if it was 10 minutes on their agenda every time, just so they would remember who I was, and it wasn't always a crisis. So I think that's a good relationship that's easily overlooked if you're working with the AAAs.
I think we had a quarterly mandated quarterly training on August 15th, and basically all was about Norris Nest, and just about half an hour before I got on this presentation, I sent the update to the AAA directors, letting them know about the guidelines for the case closures, etc., etc. So things have communicated to the regional ombudsman. So I think it behoves us also to let the AAA directors also know, so they can also, support the regional ombudsman as they move towards the implementation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Bev, I wanted to ask you a question. Nashua came out with their primer that is used to help educate the State Unit on Aging Director. You have requested multiple copies of that. So obviously you are using that document to educate more than just your State Aging Director. Unless they're like, socks and they just have disappeared and you keep replenishing them. Who else are you providing that primer to?
Everybody on the executive staff of the agency. So our communications person, our legislative person, the person who runs the Medicaid programs for the agency, our Older Americans Act Division, our fiscal office. So everybody knows. And then I've also given it to, recently gave it to a new sponsoring agency director. One of our regional programs just got a new executive director for their sponsoring agency, and I shared it with her as well, so she understands the relationships between our state, what the structure is, and our relationships at the state office, because I think it's important that so every now and then a regional ombudsman will say something like, well, a program director, I don't know, maybe say they referred a reporter to ODA. And I'll say, no, you should have probably referred them to me. And and they say, well, that's what we meant. I said, well, my office is at the Department of Aging, and, I obviously work for the Department of Aging, but let's be really clear in our communication outside the office, the statewide office, so everybody's clear on relationships. So that's good for sponsoring agencies to have that information also.
Okay, and if anyone's interested, you would get a hold of Pearl at Nashua, and if you need her contact information, feel free to ask Katie or Amity or I, and we can get you Pearl's information, and she's more than happy to send out hard copies of that document if you wish. I think that's
Hey, breaking news, if you haven't all heard, Nashua is no longer Nashua. It is now called Advancing States. And the A and the D are capitalized for aging and disability.
It's called what?
Advancing States.
Advancing States?
Yes, I believe their new website is advancingstates.org. They unveiled their new name on Sunday at their HCBS conference.
Okay. Yeah.
The A and the D are capital. They gave the directors pins. I had a meeting with my director today, and she shared her pin with me.
Wow, how interesting! That's news.
Yeah.
I don't know how we shorten that. You know, I don't know what Nashua will become, if it's going to be ADS, or I have no idea how we're going to shorten that.
Maybe we'll just have to call it by its name. Wouldn't that be?
Yeah, we might.
Okay. Anyone else have something that they're starting to do, or a way that you have that you find helpful in connecting with your local folks? And I think the reason that we talk about this is when you come in, unless you've come in as a local ombudsman who's been promoted to the state position, many of you have come in from outside of the program, and so you're excuse me, you're walking in to people who've been doing it for a while, and how can you make sure that they are looking to you for guidance? And so that's one of the reasons why having this relationship with them, learning from them, is just so important. And I don't know if Bev or Victor or any of the other mentors that are on, do you have any guidance or thoughts on maybe how to help with that relationship building if you're coming in without the ombudsman knowledge and being faced with people who are thinking, I've been doing this a lot longer than you have, and so who are you to tell me how to run the program?
I think when I came into the program in Delaware, okay, I had been in the chemical industry. Then I came to State Unit on Aging. I worked in the home community for about a couple of years or so before becoming the state ombudsman. And I think, basically what I did was, I was calling people like you, calling people like Bev and everybody. I recall one Sunday evening, I think I sent an email to you, and you said, you still new, you are new, you were in the office on a Sunday night. I was in there, and I think literally I lived on the Consumer Voice, NORC website. I think you can get a lot of information, and I think to the extent that you're willing to listen to people, even if they don't want to, listen to you. You're gonna tell me. You just listen to them, understand them, and I think you can break down the barrier. Yeah. But it's very, very important, widen your scope and everything, live on the website, get as much information from the website, because, I tell you this, there is myriad of information at that website right there. Yeah, a lot of information. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important too to identify people that you trust. I have a few of our regional ombudsmen who, I have a great deal of trust. I mean, a lot of them actually, but there are a few that are, kind of like, I'm trying to think what somebody called it recently. Something like your board, your people that you can go to, your board of advisors, people you can go to, check something out, and, all have a reaction to something that maybe a regional ombudsman did. And so I might call another, one of these advisors and say, hey, I had a situation, this happened, and this is kind of how I reacted to it. What, from a regional program perspective, what do you think about that? And so I just kind of get some feedback and some advice from them, and then that just develops more trust.
Carol,
Great idea.
We would reach out periodically. There was a regional ombudsman association for a while, and they were always very helpful to get kind of a local perspective on things. And also, and we would use them to carry our water periodically in New York, where there were things that I could not do with the legislature, that I could talk with the regional ombudsman as a group, and then, have them take that message to their local legislators and then to the state. So I found that very helpful. And I think the more people feel like they're contributing to the program, I think it unifies it. And quite frankly, I think they just feel more of a connection that sometimes you can lose if you're not reaching out to them. And I remember starting as a local ombudsman 35 years ago and thinking the people at the state level have no idea what I'm dealing with and how hard it is to submit reports and all that sort of thing. And so it was helpful, and I think for people that haven't had that experience, it's helpful to have those discussions so that they have a better understanding of, okay, from my perspective, it's hard to be in facilities on a regular basis if I feel like a third of my time is spent, figuring out how to code something.
Okay, thank you. Trying to leave plenty of time here in case anybody has a question or wants to give an example of something. I will mention that, this is one of the reasons why we have mentors assigned to a new state ombudsman, and I'm hoping that that relationship is good and that you feel comfortable in having, candid conversations about issues that you're having, or just getting feedback on things that you've done. I hope that if you are not finding that relationship to be good, that you will let me know, and we'll either get you a new mentor or try to figure out some way to make sure that that there's some relationship that you have. And of course, you don't have to just reach out to your mentor, as you all know. Everyone's willing to help in any way they can. The other thing I want to mention is NALTCO, which is the National Association of Local Long-Term Care Ombudsman Programs, is a great resource for local programs. And I highly encourage you to make sure that your local programs know about NALTCO. I think that the dues are like $20 a year or something, but that is a great organization. It's not as robust as NASOP, but certainly they get together, they share highlights and concerns, and it's a great way for local programs to speak to someone in another state about either cases that they're having or budget issues or whatever kind of topics they want. So just know that that is a resource. So we've kind of been doing the questions and everything, and I don't think that I see any new chats. I think just as a final thought, I'm not going to read these because hopefully you can, but well, let me just say, Bev, do you have any final thoughts as people are looking over these?
I don't think so. I think I chimed in on a couple of things. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Victor?
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bev. Thank you, Victor. Thanks for all of you that contributed. And for those of you who were just listening, I think that's half of the conversation, is to listen, and always know that we're here to, from NORC, to help in any way we can. And I just know that every day is a challenge, and I appreciate the work that you all are doing. And we'll hopefully see everybody in November at Consumer Voice. Sunday morning is the orientation. And I think that's it. Everybody have a great Wednesday. Talk to y'all later. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.